girls. Don't do this, girls. But the rest of you, all it's okay for you to do, because it's not really all that bad. Why, this is yet another irresponsible and highly disappointing thing from President Obama. Next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
I'm in love with Mary Jane. She's my...
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion. So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program. We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics. It is time to reel in government. It is time to roll out the era of the new American citizen.
If we can continue to get some common sense governing from both sides of the aisle, we can finally get Americans through the recession, not just Wall Street.
We need people that can change the crisis that we're seeing, and that's why, as a proud Republican, I go through the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a Republican or being a conservative, just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black Republican.
Now, for those of you that are sitting there saying to yourselves, Len, I just got to be honest with you, Lenny. That was the worst imitation of anybody trying to smoke a doobie, a dub, the chronic, a joint that I've ever heard in my life. And before I go into the beginning of the show, that's because if you knew my dad, you would know that if I would have ever tried this stuff, if I would have ever tried to experiment, if I would have ever tried to say, maybe just this one time, I would not be speaking to you today, nor would I be breathing the air that I so wonderfully and graciously breathe. That's just how my dad rolled, and that's how I rolled, and that was that. So please excuse the horrible impersonation here at the beginning of Get Right with Lenny McAllister, but I am glad that you're here. You know the drill. You know how this works. Very simple. Twitter, LennyMcAllister. Facebook, Two Walls, same name. Love the feedback. Y'all have been hitting me up all week between Joshua Black, William Barber, Tim Scott, the Tea Party, the Democratic Party. Y'all have been hitting me up, and I'm certain between today's podcast and tomorrow's NPR Tell Me More's The Barbershop that I will be on starting tomorrow nationally. We'll be talking about this topic, and I am fairly certain that I will hear more feedback from people on this. Yeah. Again, so let me just put it out there. You know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. I'm not going to apologize for what I'm about to say, as if I ever do. Well, I do when I'm really, really, really wrong, or I offend people. In this instance, if I offend you, that's too bad because I'm not wrong. Anybody that thinks that this president had the right or the obligation to sit there and equate marijuana with alcohol, say it's not that bad, and then hide behind the criminalization argument to say why we should wait and see what these laws that are legalizing recreational use, knowing, and here, and again, it seems like, in the spirit of MLK Day on Monday, I've been speaking almost purely like an African-American man and not just a pundit. I've been speaking in my color, not outside my color. For those conservatives that are against this, that say, why are you an African-American? You should be an American. It's because of times like this that I should speak as a black man. So I'm sorry if you don't get it this week. Maybe it'll be different tomorrow, but Tuesday it wasn't. Wednesday it wasn't. Today it's not. Tuesday, Joshua Black, you're making it hard for black Republicans like me saying foolish things or agreeing with foolish things and then doubling down on those foolish things, which as recently as yesterday, from what I could tell, when they stuck another microphone in his face, he backed away from the hanging from the neck, but stuck with the treason and, firing squad or whatever. He didn't necessarily say that, but he still stuck with the argument, which was insane. So Tuesday, got to speak like a black Republican. Yesterday, got to speak like a black man, like a black Republican with his William Barber, Tim Scott nonsense that was started by the Reverend William Barber against Tim Scott. Which, by the way, you got one in South Carolina, one in North Carolina. they're not that far away when he's back home in his home constituency of South Carolina. Why didn't they get an opportunity to talk? You're going to call him out now? You're going to call him out in 2014 in an election year where he's trying to get reelected and you're trying to keep your Democratic senator in North Carolina? Give me a break. He didn't just get that office last week. And I didn't just fall off the turnip truck last week. But again, got to speak like a black Republican, like a black man yesterday. I'm trying not to speak like a black Republican on this with President Obama, but I am going to speak like a black father and as a black man. Anytime you have the first African American president that turns around and basically says, you know what, weed's not all that bad, and we shouldn't be throwing black and brown kids in jail over it like we do at the disproportionate rates. You can make the second argument, but when you know the drug culture hits black youth in a completely different way, when you know that alcohol for years has been targeted at the black community in a completely different way, when you know that food, KFC, for example, I mean, that's just one. KFC, sweetening foods, McDonald's, all the very bad fried, processed, fattening foods. What are those, the hot ones or the hot sticks or whatever the kids like? All the things you see at convenience stores. Stuff that hits people that are impoverished. And generally speaking, from a disproportionate rate, particularly under this president, because it's grown underneath this president, black people face these things more. So for the first African-American president that knows us about the drug culture, that knows us about alcohol, that knows us about health care, and all the other things that allow black youth to suffer and struggle at higher rates than others throughout the country, including Latino Americans. For him to say, well, I have told my daughters not to do this, but we have to take a wait-and-see approach for everybody else. Look, I don't like President Obama. I don't hate President Obama, but I think he has squandered the historic opportunity to do something different for black America. And when you have the bully pulpit and you say these types of things, when there are studies showing that there may be a risk of jacking up your DNA, not just for yourself, but for your children. There was just a report that came out not too long ago. And again, agree, disagree, you know where to find me on Twitter, on Facebook. For those of you that have strong opinions on this and may have a strong odor around you, some of you have a strong opinion, some of you have a strong odor around you because of the strong opinion, or vice versa. You know where to find me. There was just a report on this showing that rats that took THC ended up, even though if the rat children didn't take it, they had a higher propensity to self-administer heroin. We know that you can change your DNA with a little bit of everything. There have been studies that show that if you go through certain emotional trauma, you can change your DNA that will get passed on to your children, which, ironically enough, comes up within the argument when it comes to slavery and other things. Not from me, because I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but others do. Others do. Others have purported that when you go through certain trauma, that it can impact you at such a molecular level that it can harm your children or how they deal with stress moving forward. Heck, you hear this about alcoholics, which is why they have organizations to help children of alcoholics, not because of the trauma that they've gone through dealing with that parent that was an alcoholic, but because there are certain things that those children go through. Because sometimes it's lack of nutrition. Maybe if you have an alcoholic mother, you're going to go through some things in the womb and she was still drinking. Same thing with drugs, and we know all this stuff. So to sit there and think, and heck, here's the crazy thing with me. We know, for example, with studies that the environment, too much smog, everything else, can have an impact not just on one generation, but 2 and 3 generations, more 2 than 3. And we're talking about smog. We're talking about environmental justice. So if that's the case, and this president is on the side of the environmentalists, which I'm not saying you shouldn't be, I'm not even making that argument right now. But if you know these things and that's where you reside on this, then how in the blue blazes, as an African American father in 2014, from the south side of Chicago, no less. I'm sorry, I am worked up about this today, and I probably will still be worked up about this tomorrow. Because this is what angers me about this president. I don't hate him to the point where I want him hung, by the neck until dead, like Joshua Black at least agreed to, and then kind of sort of agreed to and said, well, maybe not hanging, but maybe something else. I'm not saying that, nor would I ever say that. But my frustration with this president is he knows he has the bully pulpit. He has used the bully pulpit to advance gay marriage, to again advance legalization of those that have come here illegally. He has authorized or advocated for children of illegal immigrants, the Dreamers. And I'm not saying, those are 3 examples. And I'm not saying that he was right or wrong for doing that. I'm not getting into that argument. What I'm saying is that he made it a point to do that, to do something that would advance the well-being. And here's the key thing. Advance the well-being of those that he spoke out for, that he advocated for, whether it was those advocating for gay marriage because they wanted to get married and have a family unit, this, that, and the other, and be legally recognized. There's an argument for that. Or, legalizing those that came here illegally, those that have been here and been productive and have been residents and have been good residents. Let's find a way to make them legal citizens, or at least legally here, legal residency. There's an argument to be made there. Or for the Dreamers, kids that were born here but their parents came here illegally, for them to make sure that they don't have to worry about their family being broken up, or make sure that if they were brought here at the age of 2 or the age of 3, but have always known this as being their home, to make sure they have not only legal residency, perhaps even citizenry, as if they were born here, because, they came here at 18 months or something along those lines. And there's an argument to be made there. I get that. The frustrating thing, all 3 of those things that I just mentioned advance the well-being of the individuals that he advocated for. Can you explain? Getting flustered. Gonna take a breath. Okay, I feel better. Please explain to me, Facebook or Twitter, how pushing for or condoning or making the statements that President Obama did in the New Yorker, how that advances the well-being of individuals, particularly youth, that are already vulnerable, are already targeted by the drug culture, are already targeted by the alcohol culture, are already targeted by the gun culture, are already targeted by the, oh, you're smart so you must be acting white culture. All of these things hit African American children harder. They hit them more often, and they usually succeed at knocking them off the path, not just temporarily, but oftentimes permanently. And more than that, knocking them off permanently into a jail cell, into a coffin, into a wheelchair, onto dialysis at age 42, 43, 44. I mean, you know these things. You're the first African-American president. People actually took your image and put it beside MLK on a commemorative dish for only $19.99 if you act now, and said, you are the fulfillment of the dream. And here we sit in the week of MLK Day. Here we sit 5 years after his inauguration, almost to the day, where people flooded Washington, D.C., and there were thousands of African Americans, including African American youth, that were wearing Obama paraphernalia with your likeness on it. And you use the bully pulpit to say some kind of garbage like this. Well, we got to wait and see. I would tell my daughters not to do it, but hey, I don't see it's being that much worse than alcohol. We need to take a wait and see approach with Washington and with Colorado. I mean, it's irresponsible. That's all there is to it. Agree, disagree, you know where to find me on social media. And today, I'm not even trying to, I don't want to give both sides of the argument today. Sometimes I do, today I don't. This pisses me off. There's no way on God's green earth that the first African-American president should be even having an intellectual debate that he would not have with his own children when it comes to something like drug use. Knowing that, and you hear the argument saying, well, it's not a gateway drug. You're telling me that if you're okay with putting a little marijuana in your system, that you're not going to lace it every now and then? People that actually get into the drug culture will experiment with a little bit of everything. It's been documented. You don't just find people that are potheads, and more than that, even if you find people that use marijuana and that's it, there is a such thing as a functioning alcoholic. You're telling me that you really want to be around people that are functioning marijuana addicts? And you may say you can't get addicted to marijuana. Well, you know what? People oftentimes go look for it every day or every Friday. It is part of their routine. Now, we could talk about physical addiction, psychological addiction. But the truth of the matter is, you can't find a whole lot of people. You can find some people that can be alcoholics and still be successful in life. Just as you can find some people that will smoke a whole lot of ganja and still be okay in life. But you're not going to sit there and tell me that as they're cutting the plant with stuff, as they're selling it in illegal trade and everything else, that as we see all these weird cancers coming up, as we see autism on the rise, as we see all these weird illnesses other than cancer coming up and hitting our youth, hitting our children, when we know that black people in America die on average anywhere from 5 to 15 years younger? We know that the gun violence in America oftentimes stems around dime bags and marijuana and heroin and things along those lines. We just had somebody, my son, my good friend, the Sergeant Robert Allen Mansfield, retired from the U.S. Army. The three of us were doing the MLK Day of Service in Lincoln Larmer in the Pittsburgh area, and a guy got shot. Got shot with what? Drugs on him, heroin on him. We know, and I'm not saying President Obama was advocating heroin. What I'm saying is we know that the drug running in our communities stems back and has its stranglehold in all of the gun violence that ends up going on. And with that said, we also know that people don't always go for the big stuff. They're not always going for they're not always going for blow, crack, heroin, smack, Oxycontin, etc. No, a lot of times they're going for a dime bag. And that's how it starts out. It ain't that much harm. It's just a little bit of fun. You know that in 48 other states, this is illegal from a recreational standpoint. To even put it on par with alcohol, which, by the way, young kids don't even need to be drinking alcohol. It's not the 19-year-old that you have a problem with, even though you do. Oftentimes, it's the teenager that's drinking the alcohol at 16. And when you see malt liquor billboards up like I remember seeing growing up in Pittsburgh, 70s, 80s, they weren't just talking to the 40-year-olds. They were talking to the 17-year-olds about getting some bull or some 40s or this, that, and the other. That was lingo around teenagers. And again, you could see I don't know that much of it because I told you about my dad earlier. I'm laughing, but it's the truth. I'm happy for that, by the way. I'm not mad. Dad, you should have let me do some weed. No, I'm quite thankful he took that approach. I'm just saying that was absolutely non-negotiable, and that was the approach he took, and that's that. I don't get President Obama. I don't even try to get him anymore. I try to be objective. I don't try to get him. I don't think he's on the side of black America by and large. I think he's on the side of himself. I think he's running off the string. I don't even know if he's that interested in being a role model. I think he is the Charles Barkley of politics, and that's very, very disappointing. I mean, if you don't remember what I'm talking about, Charles Barkley about 25 years ago, I am not a role model. Parents are supposed to be role models. I'm an athlete. I really believe that President Obama, in many, many ways, since he got elected. Now, in 2008 and early 2009, I think he really kind of was willing to slide into that role for just a hair. But again, I've always said this. February 2009 was his opportunity to really make his imprint on black America. First African-American president, first Black History Month, do something notable. The notable thing he did was tell Eric Holder not to talk about race. Game, set, match for me. And ever since then, he spoke up about Trayvon Martin after getting a lot of heat. He jumped into the Henry Louis Gates situation because he knew him. But for the most part, this is not somebody that really wants to be an outgoing, everyday role model for African American youth. He is the Charles Barkley of politics. I am not a role model. That burns me up to no end. And then, on top of that, when you hold him accountable to that, he'll blame the Republicans. I don't get that. But you can't blame Republicans for these types of statements, knowing the facts behind drug use, knowing the facts behind substance abuse, knowing the facts behind addiction, knowing the facts behind how our youth in Black America get knocked off track. You can't blame Republicans for this. You are a lame duck president that has an opportunity to make a statement and make an impact on a part of the nation that is hurting, suffering, detached, and needs a true powerful example. And what more powerful example can you have than the first African-American president saying something notable other than, it's just a doobie. Anywho, and that wasn't a fake puff that time. What do you think? You know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. I'm sure those of you that have heard me talk about these types of things probably either have already figured out what you want to say. Either you agree with me 100% or you think I'm off my rocker. Either way, I want to hear back from you. In the meanwhile, I'm going into this Thursday. You can catch me on Sun News Network later on today. Of course, you can find me on NPR National Public Radio. I'll be in the barbershop on Tell Me More on Friday, going throughout the weekend. Check your local listings. In the meanwhile, I love you. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. TCNGB, stay warm. Take care and God bless. Peace.
America, love. Do it, baby.